and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Today we're talking about COVID-19 and communities of color. City Councilman Herb Wesson has recently released an informative new video that talks about who can be hurt if we reopen LA too quickly.
These protests have called for easing restrictions that were meant to slow the spread of the virus. But people are forgetting about those of us who the virus is especially affecting. Doesn't our health matter? Doesn't our safety matter? Don't our lives matter?
Joining us now is Councilman Wesson. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Excellent. Well, tell us about this video and why you made it.
I think that in this business, the most important thing that we can do as public servants are to push and create conversations. It is important that we reopen, but we need to do it in a very smart and informed way, a way that does not adversely affect people. So I want to ensure that we are talking about this, the effects of reopening.
Mm-hmm. The video really hits home the statistics that say Black and brown people have been particularly hard hit. Let's talk about some of the reasons behind this.
Okay.
I know that underlying health issues are a big cause. Can you discuss a little bit about that and what we see in the video?
Yeah. Well, as I said a few seconds ago, create a conversation. You can see that now people are, there was a big article in the newspaper, I think yesterday or the day before, that referenced the Latino community. People have to recognize when we reopen, the first people that are going to go back to work are going to be low-wage earners, individuals of color, because these are the people that their job, they can't use computers to work in a grocery store or to be a restaurant worker. So they're going to have to be there themselves, and they are going to be the ones that are exposed to hundreds of people. Our grocery clerks see hundreds of people every day, whereas we might see 5 or 6 sequestered in our homes. And so one of the reasons why it's important to look at all of this is the science is what drives us. And the science indicate that individuals that have pre-existing conditions are more at risk. And when you look at certain communities of color, you see that there are hypertension, obesity, diabetes, and a lot of things similar to that.
Let's talk about some of these protests against keeping the city and the state closed.
Yeah.
What would you say to those protesters?
I get it. You know, most of them are good people, and they're going stir crazy too, and they want their freedoms, and God bless you. This is something that we in this country have never ever experienced before. It is a war. It is not a war with bombs and bullets, but it's a war against an invisible virus. But I understand, and I think that it's nothing wrong with us beginning to reopen, but everything needs to be based on science, needs to be based on medicine. And I don't believe that any of the protesters want to be in a position because of their actions where they make somebody else sick. So we all want to reopen. Why don't we come together and come up with a common sense plan to do it that minimizes individuals at risk? That's all I'm suggesting.
In your district, are there any particular resources for people, like to get information?
Well, you go to herbwesson.com. You can go to the various websites of the other council members from the city of Los Angeles. I'm proud that my colleagues have really worked hard to try to make sure accurate information is out so that individuals can get it, read it, and then know how to take care of themselves and their families.
What are you hearing from business owners?
It is, you're looking at more than 50% of the people in this city out of work. Business owners are struggling and creatively doing anything and everything that they can to keep afloat. So there is a big need for assistance to businesses, primarily small businesses, and there's just not enough resources. That's one of the responsibilities, in my opinion, of the federal government. We, on the city level, have put together a renter's assistance program. We've also put together pockets of money to help small businesses, but that's never going to be enough. So the federal government has to really step in. This is a moment where government should rise, not shrink. So I am promoting something similar to back in the 30s, an FDR New Deal, where we can provide a people's bailout, provide good jobs or livable wage jobs with health insurance, provide grants and assistance to mom and pop property owners, landlords, and small businesses. Ensure that individuals that are struggling to pay their rent and stay in their apartments are afforded the opportunity to do that. This is not the time that we want to put more people on the street or close more businesses. We should be doing just the opposite. Government should grow right now. It should not shrink.
Absolutely. If people need that renter's assistance or small business assistance, can they get the information on your website?
Yes, herbwesson.com, and then there are links that will tell you where to go depending on what your need is.
There has been some confusion in terms of the county news conferences or what the county is saying in the city. How closely are the city and the county working together to get the word out?
Well, you know, for years, people have complained about a lack of coordination or maybe even a competition between different levels of government. I believe things like homelessness and things like this virus has brought us together, where for the first time in my political career, we are really, really trying to coordinate, trying to work together, because we've all come to the conclusion that the most important thing that we can do now is to put the people first. So as the more we work together, I think the more efficient we will get. And I'm optimistic that the residents of this region will be proud of the work that we've done.
You mentioned the homeless. There was an outbreak on Skid Row. What's the city doing to, let the homeless know you need to social distance?
Well, prior to this, homelessness was our focus, and we were creatively trying to develop ways to deal with this. So even though now we're in the midst of this virus, the homeless problem has not gone away. So I think there is even a higher sense of urgency. We've converted rec and park centers into shelters. We have acquired or purchased trailers that are being placed in various locations throughout the city of Los Angeles, where we can move people into these trailers. We have continued to fast track the construction of affordable housing and homeless housing. So we've done an awful lot, but there's still so much more to do. There are so many people that are in a position to give. A lot of them we've been able to touch their heart, and we have received a lot of donations.
Well, Councilman, thank you so much for coming in to discuss this very serious issue with us.
Welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm Paul Krekorian, Chair of the committee. This is going to be a different process, obviously, than we've ever had before. And as everyone knows, needless to say, the world has changed.
Well, it's that time of year where LA City plans its budget for fiscal 2021, but there is no such thing as business as usual these days. Fortunately, I'm joined by Councilman Paul Krekorian, who is the chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, and he can walk us through how things are going to work this year.
In a city of our size, obviously the budget is an exceptionally complex beast. The biggest revenue sources that the city has are property tax, sales tax, our business tax, and the temporary occupancy tax that comes from hotel stays.
Well, what a difference a year makes. Last year, the city basically celebrated eliminating any kind of structural deficits. It was in a really good, solid fiscal position, great reserve fund, and this is a different realm right now. So what are some of the key changes?
In this unprecedented environment that the country, the world is in because of COVID-19, there's tremendous unpredictability about this budget. I've been budget chair now for 8 years, and even when we were still in the Great Recession, there has never been a time like this where our revenues are so unpredictable, our expenses are so unpredictable, what support we may get or not get from the federal government in terms of stimulus and other things, completely unpredictable. And we usually have a very precise method of predicting revenues based on historical experience.
Sure.
We can just shred all that historical experience and throw it out the window right now because we're in uncharted territories. So the mayor's budget proposal is appropriately extremely conservative. He's projecting revenue growth of less than 2%, whereas in recent years we've been projecting over 5% annual growth, and that makes a great deal of difference in our budget because, as I mentioned, most of our revenue sources are economically sensitive.
Sure.
When there's economic growth, we get a lot more sales tax. Property tax goes up. The businesses have more gross receipts. There's more gross receipts tax. People are traveling, so we get our hotel tax. People are building things, so they're paying permit fees. All of those things happen when there's a vibrant economy. When there's not a vibrant economy, and when we're facing the economic catastrophe that the world is facing right now, all of those revenue sources decline dramatically.
You still have to go into this budget process right now. You still have to come up with a plan in this arena of unknown. And so how does that process normally work, and how is that process potentially going to work this time?
Well, in a typical budget year, the Budget and Finance Committee spends about 2 weeks in daily meetings reviewing the mayor's budget proposal. And we bring in every head of every department. We bring in all the staff from those departments that can tell us about the line items in their budget, respond to our questions, and we really go through the budget with a fine-tooth comb. The public participates in every single one of those meetings. We have all of our neighborhood council budget advocates participating in this. So it's a very intensive review that spans over the course of weeks, and we have literally hundreds of people in the room. Well, obviously we can't do that in this environment. And so for basic health reasons, we can't have a typical budget hearing. But also that in-depth analysis, in my view, would be fruitless right now because we don't have the information about revenues that we need to have to make intelligent assessments about each of those departmental budgets. That will come, but the coincidence of timing is that right when we have to prepare our budget is exactly when the impacts of this COVID crisis are hitting, and we can't yet predict the economic impacts that we'll have in the coming years. So this will be an ongoing process that will continue beyond our normal budget season, probably well into the next fiscal year.
Are there things that are set in stone, like just general concerns about cutbacks in regards to public safety? Is all of that stable? Can people be assured that that's going to be as is, if not more solid?
One thing that the mayor has done in his proposed budget, which I think will probably have broad support within the council, is no reduction in our sworn firefighters and our sworn police officers, because that is so essential to the public's safety and to keeping people alive, ambulance response time and so forth.
Los Angeles is literally the gateway to the West. I mean, it is such an important conduit for so many things that actually may not even be relative to what happens within this city. I mean, things that go export, import, etc. What are the concerns? And you're talking about revenue sources, but there are additional revenue sources that I imagine are at risk because of the fact that the world has shifted. People are not traveling, businesses altered somewhat. So there are a lot more things at stake than just property taxes, etc.
Yeah, in some respects, I try to be optimistic about the future of our economy, and this is certainly going to be difficult for the world for the foreseeable future. I also think that Los Angeles has an opportunity to outpace the rest of the country in terms of our economic recovery. We did in our recovery from the Great Recession. We had an enormous economic boon after that. And I think we have the opportunity to do that as well, for many of the reasons that you say. Because as international trade resumes, Los Angeles is the essential city in America for international trade. When it comes to international travel, LAX has been the busiest destination airport in the world for years now, and we've been breaking all records until this for traffic through the airport. So Los Angeles is a global city. It's the capital of the Pacific Rim. And I think in many respects, as things start to pick up, they will pick up disproportionately in Los Angeles because of that. And that's going to be to the benefit of our local economy and the people whose jobs depend on that local economy.
As Governor Newsom said a long time ago, going back is going to be not a light switch off and on, it's going to be a dimmer up and down. So exactly what you were saying, there'll be adjustments made the whole time.
We don't yet know how society is going to change.
Sure.
There are some fundamental things that are probably going to be different. And some of those may be better. For example, now that we're all so comfortable with this telecommuting option, that may very well take people off the road permanently. There will be some reduction in the amount of trips that we take, I think, because people are now comfortable with the idea of having Zoom meetings, for example. We don't know. We don't know how society will be changed because of this.
This is an incredibly important issue for all of the citizens of Los Angeles. And if they have something to say, or they really want to keep up on what's going on, or they really want to have, some inside information, is there a good route for them to take to be able to be either a part of this process or at least informed of what's happening?
Sure. Probably the best way would be to go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, where we keep people informed that way. And I think staying in touch with their respective council members is an important part of this as well, to let each member know what the priorities are of the people of Los Angeles. If there's any good news in the budget this year, it's that in the time that I've been budget chair for the last 8 years, we have methodically built up the largest reserve fund in the history of the city of Los Angeles. We started the Budget Stabilization Fund under my chairmanship, first time we've ever had one. So those two things taken together give us the ability to ride out downturns in the economy.
Councilman Krekorian, thank you for all you do, and I wish you a world of luck, and I will stay optimistic with you.
Thank you very much.
The coronavirus, COVID-19, brought with it a trifecta of bad news for health, for finances, and now, as it turns out, for mental health as well. I'm delighted to welcome Joanne O'Brien and Dr. Laura Kokinda from LA City Medical Services. Dr. Kokinda, as a species, how are we at adapting to such stressful and dramatic changes in our lives?
You know, humans are actually quite resilient and quite adaptable, which is the good news. Lots of things that psychologists are recommending now is, first of all, keep your routine to some degree. It's going to look very different. That's something we all have to accept, but try to keep a routine. If you're working from home, try to get out of your PJs, get into some sort of work frame of mind.
And we don't mean your daytime PJs from
Right.
your nighttime. We actually mean actual get dressed.
At least to some degree, yes.
I love that whole idea of not being perfect. I think all of us are, obviously not necessarily understanding what's going on, or if we do understand what's going on, not understanding where it's going to go, and then feeling as if we have to be brave and bold and strong and a teacher and a mom and a worker, and if you're working, remain open. But you can give yourself a little bit of a permission slip during this time to not be that perfect person.
You can always give yourself that permission slip within reason, but now especially, it's not about winning the pandemic. It's about getting through the pandemic, keeping everyone safe, healthy, balanced. That's what you're looking to do.
There are some good things. I see more families together outside walking, where you didn't see that before. Enjoy the moment of being together with your family, because we're always so busy usually.
This seems to be a really good time for people to pick up new pastimes and new skills. I know that that's one of the things that a lot of people have decided to do in order to make this time valuable personally. You made banana bread.
I did. I'm on the list of the million other people apparently who've been making banana bread lately. But that goes back to the coping skills. You want to keep yourself busy. It distracts from the negative thinking, the worry, the stuff that's not productive.
So being quarantined at home has caused some issues for people. And what are some of the things that you have heard of or seen when people have been living in this new reality?
Conflictual relationships have had some fuel to the fire.
There are resources in LA City for people who have found themselves in an untenable situation because of those that they are quarantined with. I mean, I know we had mentioned something about spousal abuse and terrible things like that. But there are places for people to go. You're not trapped.
Right, there are safe shelters. I know the Los Angeles Police Department is ready to respond. They want to know about this. There's safe shelters. There are numbers available. So I think Chief Moore's message is you don't have to stay there. You're not alone, and there's help.
Well, that's really nice to know, because I think that there's also that issue of we don't have any choices right now. We don't have any power. We don't have any ability to make any decisions. For someone who normally doesn't think of themselves as having any kind of real mental health issues, what are the triggers or what are the signs that if you're having at home, you should realize, wait, maybe I need to take this a step further and get some assistance?
It's the things we mentioned, the trouble sleeping, irritability, detachment, low mood, or the inability to turn off those excessive worries. It's not a little bit of that. It's, okay, this has gone on for a few days in a row. It's continuing to go on. Usually when it reaches about a week of these concerns, it's definitely time to reach out. It's good to be proactive and get some support or resources as soon as you notice you're not able to use your usual coping tools and get yourself out of the rut that you're feeling.
They talk about the stages of grief. Are there actual stages that we can sort of take a look at and see that these, because I know that you had worked in an arena in which people were incarcerated, prior to your work with the city. So are there stages that people go through that you can almost oddly predict given what's going on now?
Definitely. The stages of grief, it's not just the loss of a person, which unfortunately some people are experiencing now, but the loss of other things. Everyone's life, no matter who you are, has been turned upside down, and it's been that way for long enough now, where the initial shock of the situation is wearing off and people are going through these stages. Adults, children, I was just reading some literature on teenagers having a very hard time right now because their social life has been completely changed and limited, and they struggle with coping with those emotions. But if you look at the stages of grief, you can apply a lot of that to the situation.
So The whole idea of masks came a little bit late versus the very beginning of what we began to learn about COVID-19. So why masks now? What is it about masks?
The virus, as we've learned, is spread through droplets. It's an aerosol. So those, when you're normally speaking, those will just come out. The cloth covering just simply keeps that spray in.
You see people wearing them in a car and you're thinking, why? Why do they have that on in their car and they're by themselves in their car?
They may have had someone in their car so that they're protecting themselves or that person. There might be a story there you don't know about, or it's just that person's comfort level, which is okay. However, is going to help that person get through all of these changes in the pandemic.
I know one of the fragile groups, obviously, are seniors, and this has got to be really tough for them because not only is there a health crisis, but there's also that sense of isolation because now they can't have the visits that they would have from family members or have the experience of socializing in a restaurant setting or something like that. So what are some of the things that we can do to help those fragile communities such as seniors?
Definitely reach out. If you can, give them a FaceTime chat or video chat. Let them see your face. If you can safely drop off a care package or something, that's something people have been doing also. And keep in mind, seniors are a population that's lived through a lot of different adverse things in the past, so they probably have a lot to offer you as well if you have some conversations about how to be resilient and get through tough times.
That's actually, I hadn't thought about that because, so many of our parents and our grandparents have lived through nothing like this, however, but they have lived through really tough times. So they could be a really good source of advice with all of us trying to manage this.
Definitely.
Yeah. So now we're going to get back into the workplace, maybe slowly, and that obviously means there have to be some very conscientious choices made there.
When it's safe, people will be returning to the work, but how we work might be different. For example, you have a construction worker who maybe would share tools. That's not a good idea anymore. Things like that. When they're up in a building something, they'll have to be apart 6 feet. So I think our world will look different. We'll probably have a lot more Zoom meetings. I don't know when we'll be ready to have 20, 30 people in a room for a meeting. So I think our world, we can go back to work, but how we do that is going to look different.
And
for
how
a while.
can we prep for that psychologically? Because there are going to be people who are going to jump right back in because they're social creatures and they miss humanity. There are going to be other people who are going to be terrified that they are going to get sick or bring that sickness home. Or, the scope and scale is going to vary. So what should we internally be doing to sort of work our way back into, because we've all changed, whether I scrub things down forever is a big question mark in my life. What's going to happen? How do we figure that part out? How do we be sensitive to what's happening internally and those around us?
I think one thing goes back to be careful judging others and their situations you may not know or internal processes someone else might be going through you're not aware of. But also be mindful that you're going to have to stay in the moment. We want to practice mindfulness. Don't get too far ahead because we don't really know what's going to happen. It's a lot of unknowns, and that's hard to cope with for any of us.
So when all this is past and we look back, how has Los Angeles done?
I'm completely impressed on how Los Angeles has handled it. I think everybody really worked together. Everybody did what they were supposed to do. And you can see it by the numbers. Mm-hmm. So if you just watch those and if you're data driven, but it's been pretty impressive of how the whole community has come together and helped each other. I think that's what's been amazing.